Hello, and thank you so much for joining me today, Larry Garcia. I am so excited to have you here for all kinds of different reasons. One, because we use your software, but two, because you have an amazing story of building a couple of different things. One of them software, one is a very unique, I think, path that got you to where you are today. And if I understand this correctly, you were once a civics teacher, is that right?
That was, yeah, it was an inner city Miami civics and economics teacher. So it's 3 quarters in civics and then 1 quarter in economics for an inner city school in Miami, Florida.
So how does one get from there to building software?
Oh yeah, it's a great roundabout story. So originally out of college, I was in finance and worked at Merrill Lynch and worked at Deutsche Bank's mutual fund arm. And then I met my now wife, and she was a teacher. She lived in France at the time, and we did long distance for a little bit. But at some point, I gave up my job and moved to France. So we were in France and Spain for she was there for 2 years. I was there for a year and a half, and then we moved back and her whole family were teachers, both parents, her twin brother's a teacher, and I said, let me try out the family business. So found a job at a school in Miami near downtown, and it was sort of in the wheelhouse of civics, which I was super interested in, and it had a little component of economics, which I had a finance degree from college. And so I did that for three and a half years. And then at some point, I said, all right, well, I kind of want to get back into the finance world, and just met up with a friend of mine who was college roommates with one of my closest friends from high school. So Brian Dosal was the founder of Brightgauge, and he said, hey, I have a startup and it's really small, and can I pay you a teacher salary and you can learn tech? And I said, like, I'm really intrigued, and going from a teacher salary can't go much further down in Miami, Florida. And so I said, yeah, let's try it out. And so I decided not to go back into finance. I went and joined them at Brightgauge back in, those I interviewed with him in 2012 and joined in 2013 at the beginning. And then, yeah, I got into not only technology, but, the MSP industry. Um, and so, yeah, that was sort of a roundabout way, and then got connected. We built that business, had a great run there. It was a great time, great product. And then this was actually a little bit of our internal tool at Brightgauge. We never did much with it. It didn't get that far along when it finally, the company got sold to Continuum. I stayed on for a year, sort of as like an office lead, managing director type at the office. And then yeah, just kind of went my own way, and we said, hey, we have this code, let's try something out. And yeah, we've been building Strety here since 2021. So
So how did I mean, you said a little bit about you used it as an internal tool, but how did you stumble into business operating systems? Was it one of those like everything's broken and we need to fix this somehow, or was it oh my gosh, I read this book?
oh, it was serendipity for sure. So it was, and I can tell you the day, the person, everything. So we were at we were at a Tiger Paw conference
Okay.
in Omaha, Nebraska, and one of our clients at the time. So my friend Nick Olerud. So shout out to Nick. He had just recently done Brightgauge. He's like, you need to read this book. There's a KPI component, and Brightgauge is super important. Read this book. And we had done well. We were growing for sure. So it wasn't like a pain point that we were searching, but gosh, our trajectory really changed after we read that traction book. And that opens you up to, you read that, and then you start reading like the scaling up Rockefeller habits, and you start reading different things by Peter Drucker or Andy Grove at Intel, and you start getting into that operating system mind frame. But we were blown away by that book, and implemented it. Yeah, I think that was back in 2014 maybe, but that's how we came across it, by pure serendipity.
Yeah, it's really funny. I think everybody goes through that process of, hey, you should really read traction. You read that, and then you're like, okay, that's amazing. And then there's like four or five other ones out there that are kind of similar.
Hmm.
And what I have found, and maybe you found the same thing, a lot of us tech people tend to move more into EOS and traction than scaling up for whatever reason. Now, I found that some of the Canadians tend to go to scaling up, and some of the United
Yeah.
States folks tend to EOS, which is really kind of funny. I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but that seems to be what we found.
Yeah, totally. I even think right now of like Nucleus Networks out of Vancouver, like they were scaling up back in the day, and yeah, exactly. Like it's definitely more in the Canadian side, but yeah, I mean for us, it made sense for us, right? The EOS one was like more, um I don't want to say built for smaller companies. I know personally very large companies that run off EOS. But yeah, I mean it's regional. It's kind of like um, peer pressure, I suppose, right? Like it's what everybody knows and they know it, and that's it. That's what's just going to grow. So
It is funny though. I think every peer group that I've ever been in, whether we've brought it up or somebody else brought it up, is like, "Oh, are you running a business operating system of some variety, shape, form?" Well, and if it is, what is it? And by and large, unless they're Canadian, it has been EOS. This is what we're doing, and like, when did you pick it up? And usually, it's been like within the last year of people joining peer groups and understanding that they need to get out more and see what other people are doing and really start to mature the business. And I'm interested in that. You said it was what, 2 years in when you guys started to, or at least 2 years after you started with Bright Gauge, that you started to implement EOS.
yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I think in 2014, we were probably in like the 7 to 10 employee range, and in that post reading that, we went to almost close to 40 employees, and I don't think we would have done that without putting an operation, system in place, right? Like it was every decision was like a little bit more reactive. It was, what I would say like the biggest efficiency for us was we were doing a lot of what we called firefighting by the water cooler, which
Yeah,
is two people from a team will have a problem and they try to solve it just them two, and then not bring in the other three. And there's always like a repercussion of a decision, right? Without bringing them in. Like, well, why do we do that? That's going to mess this other thing up. And EOS or operating systems in general solve that, right? By saying, do a weekly cadence, meet once a week, put all your problems in one place. Obviously, if there's a fire somewhere, you have to handle it, right? And that's, the MSP world, like that has to be handled regardless
every day, all day, right?
every day, all day. But there's certain things that we can be a little bit more insightful, talk things through, and try to solve things together at the same time.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we found, and maybe this is something that everyone will resonate with, right? We all have gone to these meetings that should have been an email in some way, shape, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And it stopped that. Like, immediately stopped the meetings that should have just been an email, because you have that cadence and you have a very specific agenda during that cadence. So it ends the crazy of
yeah.
meetings to have meetings.
It definitely is the crazy like that. That saved us. We went down 80% in meetings, right? There was meetings for everything. And it always had the little bit of intro time, even though it wasn't defined. It's like, hey, how are you doing? And it had like, well, what problem are we working on? And what have we tried? And, and you do that for 7 different issues across different people as opposed to
It's a lot.
consolidating. Yeah, it's a lot. So that helped a ton of making meetings more efficient for us.
And for those of you that aren't aware, EOS, Scalia, it doesn't matter which operating system that you use for your business, they all have some type of meeting cadence. It doesn't, they're a little different, but they're all essentially the exact same thing. You make sure that you have either your departments or your leadership team sit down once a week for a specially defined meeting, and that way you are adjusting or at least attending to every single issue that you have, every to do that you needed to get done, all of those things, they're all discussed at this meeting. So you don't have that time suck of all of these meetings through the week. And that really does end that. So when you started these, was it just your leadership team that was meeting, or did you break them out by department at that time, or did you just, start with one and then slowly build over time?
Yeah, we definitely did that slowly build over time. So it was starting just the leadership team. So it was four of us having these type of meetings, and we did that for, gosh, I want to say 2 or 3 quarters.
Yeah,
And then it was sort of like these were all the leaders of other, weekly meetings, right? So they would then run the meetings downstream and try to follow the same sort of format. Maybe some adjustments. Like I ran the sales and marketing team and success team. And so for sales, like it was a little bit shorter. It was a little bit heavier on KPIs because we were looking through pipeline, we're looking through size of deals and stuff like that. And that had a little bit longer KPI scorecard portion. And the issues list tend to be a little bit shorter, right? It's if the demo account's working, if we're going to the right conferences, if certain features are being brought up, then that might be shorter. So we gave ourselves the grace to say, all right, let's adjust it by team. But at the leadership one, we pretty much followed it to the book.
yeah, we same here. And I think the first extraneous meeting that we brought in was service for us, just because obviously we're a service-led organization.
Mhm.
So that was the first one that came in, and then operations, and then business development for us. And the same thing. Some of the other ones are a little bit shorter. You don't have as many people, you don't have as many issues. They're heavier on metrics, whatever the situation is, they can be adjusted. It's not like they have to be a 90-minute meeting every single
Yeah,
time, or maybe you got lucky and you don't have a million issues to discuss.
yeah, yeah.
Occasionally you have that, right?
Yeah, or look, if there's nothing, we've had weeks where there's nothing on the plate, and we say, all right, well, let's just skip it either to later in the week or to the next one, right? If we can skip a whole week, that's perfectly fine too.
So other than finding some time, right? Because we all time is something that you can't create more of, and you can't buy it. You like you just can't. Unfortunately, we all wish we could. What other than making additional time available out of meetings did you find changed on implementation?
I think what it did was it turned a lot of, and gosh, I don't even know if type B person is an actual thing that exists, but it turned a lot of
It
type
is.
B people into a type A person, right? And you don't make them into a fully type A person, but they started documenting things a little bit better. They had a place to put things. It definitely improved that a lot. It just got people a little bit more orderly. And so just seeing that, and I would say that like that gave back a lot of fruit for career development, right? We have people who like lead massive organizations at like Monday.com, that, and by no means were they like super type B person, but there was a place, we had a system in place, they followed it, and they took some of that to those companies. So that was really helpful with like the performance management piece.
Yeah, 100%. Did you see a culture shift at all?
We did see a culture shift, yeah. So it became went from a real reactive workforce of there's a problem, it has to get solved, to making space for being proactive and getting ahead of things and putting systems in place, even if they weren't, an EOS system or a scaling up system or a pinnacle system. It was like, hey, all right, well, we need to bring in more leads. Let's put in a, there's nothing in like the traction book or the pinnacle book
Hmm.
about that. So they'll find somewhere else and they say, all right, we've put in a system before, we know how to put in a system and follow it.
100%. I know we found we had a huge culture shift and for the better, 100%. And it boiled around being able to define, and this is so silly, but a lot of people don't define their mission properly. They don't define what their culture actually is and what their core values are. And until they know what those particular pieces are, they've got people doing things all over the place that don't necessarily align, but they haven't put things into words the way that they should. Did you guys find the same thing?
We found exactly the same thing. And that core values, like defining the core values and sitting through it, and we had a lot of iterations on it. When we finally ended up with the ones that we even follow to today, it helped us with hiring a ton, right?
Oh,
It
yeah.
helped us a lot with evaluation. Because before it was kind of like, are they doing a good job? And just it was kind of like a binary, like yes or no. Like you kind of didn't really define it, but like then saying, we want humble, passionate, and good people, right? And do they fall into that category? That gives a little bit more of a matrix of the person of like, all right, they're passionate about their work and they're very good at what they do, but like maybe they're always throwing things in your face. They're always fighting you on something. They're not humble, right? Like they don't give a great soft touch to the customer experience, because they're acting like they know more than the customer. So it helped a lot of definition on how are they performing, and is this the right person to hire, to add a new team member?
I love that. I think everybody that I've ever talked to, they've had an iteration of that particular thing. Ours is awesome come standard. Same iteration, just different words, right?
Yeah,
And, rock solid service is another one for us, and we give a shit. Those are our three. And if you're not falling into those particular things, if you don't, they get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it, then obviously we have issues. But yeah, so
exactly.
those we saw a huge culture shift with that. And like you said, with the hiring, it's so easy to sit down and realize like, nope, they're not going to fit into that particular core value, or maybe I'm not sure, we'll find out, that kind of thing. And once they're defined, it's super easy to figure that out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, other things that you've touched on already, and the process defining, and especially things getting into a repeatable process, right? Because we're software development, MSPs, we are all very process driven organizations. Not every business is, but I guess the question is should they be, for one? And two, where did you guys start? Was there a particular process that you started on that made sense? So that's two questions, and I apologize for that.
Oh, no, no worries. The yes, I think process is super important. If you fundamentally think about like, the MSP industry specifically, right? Like it's all about productivity, right? Like the computers are just the vessel, right? But like if we were in some alternative universe and you were changing computers to magic powder, like that's what the IT MSP is here to make a company more efficient through technology,
Mhm.
and it should be through operation systems. So um, they should be sort of spreading the gospel of operating systems, be it a Pinnacle, be it an EOS, be it a scaling up, of saying, hey, this is how I run my company very efficiently through these systems that are put in place, right? They're just not electrons, right? They're actual people and processes in place. So I think that part is super important. For us, the most important thing was the meeting agenda was so important because it's the multiplying the amount of time of wasted meetings by the amount of people in a room times salary. When you do that calculation, there's a crazy thing where it's like if you just cut back on 10% of meetings and you do all that multiplication, you're talking about possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
Yeah.
having that process in place of like, hey, let's have a meeting about this. Like, no, we're not going to do that. Here's the level 10 meeting, or here's the weekly tactical meeting that we have once a week. Put it there. Is it an emergency? Okay, that's different, right? There we can have an emergency meeting, but we're going to label it an emergency meeting so that everybody on staff knows that this is not something we typically do and it's saved, reserved only for emergencies, right? If it can wait until that meeting where we can all think clearly at the same time in the same headspace, that was the biggest thing for us. So that was huge. Very, very, very close second was the, what they call OKRs or rocks or quarterly goals and all that stuff because of to move away from being reactive to growing your organization is like, all right, well, we need something that moves, the ball down the field. And we're going to do that in quarterly rocks or goals or OKRs. And so, all right, what is that going to be? Who's going to be in charge and report for that? It might take multiple people, but who's ultimately, in charge or responsible or accountable for it? So that was probably something else that was a very close second for us was that sort of quarterly component.
So I know we get together at the beginning, or actually at the end of every year. I want to say it's the beginning because it kind of feels like the beginning as the
Yeah,
year winds down, right?
yeah.
And we do our year end, but also our planning meeting for the next year. And we look at our goals. Did we hit them all? What does that look like? And we all put out here's our financial goal that we want to meet. Are we going to meet it? And what is our stretch goal? Did you guys always have stretch goals as well? Like we know,
Yeah, we always
right?
had stretch goals. Yeah,
And when you're building, for those of you again that aren't familiar with rocks and some of these terms, they're really just a goal that you set. We call it a rock because it's harder to push up the hill, right? It's a bigger thing. So if the goals or rocks are hit consistently quarter over quarter, not only are you going to hit that financial goal, you're usually going to hit your stretch goal as well, or you're going to be pretty darn close. So that's what all of this leads up to, right? All of these goals build into the financial goals, build into the financial well being, but also the well being and morale of the company at the end of the day. So, super important for those. And I love that I've heard it over and over again, but you actually think in metrics, and it might be from Bright Gauge. It might be
yeah,
from using it for
yeah,
so long, but the metrics are so important, whether they're OKRs or KPIs or whatever you want to call your metrics. And looking across the business, looking at each person and the accountability for each one of those. I know, like, our folks are accountable for SLAs on the service team. I'm accountable for a gazillion other things that everybody else isn't, but I'm accountable for them being accountable for other things as,
yeah.
a CEO. So it's a very different way of looking at it. And again, I think it's more efficient. And you talked about, bringing back all that time from the meetings, things along those lines. I know one of the other things that we have found, my husband and I run the business together, and we have an EA that we both share. And I think that's one of the things that we didn't realize we were spending so much time uh, talking through email with folks, on phone calls with things, scheduling time. I think I've gotten back almost 2 hours out of every single day, which is
Wow.
crazy when you think about that. So, metrics coming through how much time you can get back. I'm not, advocating get yourself an EA, Larry, but get yourself an EA, Larry, 'cause it's amazing.
Yeah, oh gosh. We're gonna have to talk offline about this because it is high on my list.
Well, I had no idea. One of the things that we had set metrics for ourselves, Dave and I, coming through, like how much time do we actually spend on certain things, right? Figuring out where we're spending our time because we're not hitting our rocks, we're not hitting our goals. And why is that happening? So we went through and figured out we're spending like 4 hours a day on email. It was insane how much time we were
Yeah.
spending on email every day, right? You think about that's half the day
Yeah. Yeah.
communicating with people that we don't necessarily need to do. So handing that off was a big thing for us. So that was an easy metric that we were tracking along the way to figure out where our time was going, how it was being spent. Is it being spent effectively and efficiently? Are we losing money doing that? Which we were, even though it was quote unquote making us money because we were
Yeah.
closing deals through emails and things along those lines. I mean, it's not like I completely get away from ever writing an email again, but it's a lot of time.
It's so much time nowadays.
Yeah,
It just makes it so easy for someone to get into your inbox and having someone that, gosh, even just filtering, like not even the
right?
responding, like someone just filtering or telling you, hey, these 4 out of 20 is important is, I mean, I know that there's massive, it's on my list, so we
I
might
know
have to
you're
talk
probably
offline, but
you're thinking through all of this. I can see
yeah,
you doing it.
yeah, exactly. Like, oh God.
So as we're thinking through some of that, I mean, what are some of the KPIs that you can throw out or OKRs or whatever you want to call them that you could say for any business out there that you should be tracking? Which ones are important?
I look coming from a sales and marketing sort of lens. I mean, you have nothing if you don't have sales, right? If there's no pipeline in there, if you're not getting out there into the community, if people don't know who your business is or who you are. So I do love, you know, pipeline numbers of pending meetings, of meetings, just even to network, right? Like if you're starting out and you're in the smaller side, like are you getting out there consistently? Are you having conversations, be it over the phone or in person? Are you hosting, community events? Just so people know who you are, right? So if you think of like in the MSP world, they are the expert of sort of cybersecurity of a lot of things, right? And depending on the MSP, that some are a little bit more specialized than other, almost like doctors, right? There's primary care doctors, there's emergency doctors, there's MSSPs, all that. But at the very least, like that someone knows that you exist, that if they do want to outsource their IT, that you're available. So meetings, networking meetings, calls with current customers is super important to us. And I fault that because we haven't done a great job at Strety just yet, but we did do a phenomenal job with BrightGauge. So we want to get in with every customer and have a conversation, get updates because their worlds are changing too. So we'd like to be up to date on that. And it's always like we felt like the oldest customer was the one that knew us the least, right? Knew us the least about what we've been developing, which way we're going, what pain points do they have, right? There's always little things that maybe don't get a customer to open a support ticket, but are annoying. And you only uncover those on those kind of customer success quarterly business review type things. So that's another KPI is how many customers are we meeting with once a quarter. And that was a super important KPI for us. There's the standard financials and EBITDA and all that stuff, but to me, a lot around sales pipeline or around meetings and opportunities was important.
Yeah, I don't think people give the credence to the account management side that they should.
Yeah.
Because I know vendors look at account management a little bit differently than the MSPs do, and the conversations are a little bit different, but they do have some of the same pieces, parts like you just described, like what's important to you, what does that look like, how do we make that better, can we apply technology to the things that are important, or how do we move your business forward? that kind of stuff. So those are very, very important, and most MSPs don't do those enough.
Yeah, yeah, and there's always space to do more for sure.
100%. I have one more question, and then I want to be able to have you show your screen and such as far as that goes, and actually be able to see what study can do and how it applies to EOS or scaling up or Pinnacle or any of those things. But we've talked about all of these super cool processes. We've talked about metrics. We've talked about these awesome meetings that have a very specific agenda. But different businesses have to do things a little bit differently, right? So if you're a nonprofit, does this work for you? If you're a government entity, can this work for you? Because sometimes you have to follow Robert's rules for meetings and such. So is there a break where this doesn't work anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. Gosh, we have, oh God, everything across the universe. We've seen school districts, local governments do their own sort of flavor of an EOS or a Pinnacle. We've seen a lot of nonprofits, Habitat for Humanity, a couple of other ones, United Way, local chapters. The Make a Wish Foundation and a couple of different local chapters are Strety users and follow again EOS or Pinnacle or something of the sort. So I think it's useful. I think what will happen is there might be two or three things that you drop off. There might be like, well, we don't necessarily need to see, where we're at in 10 years, like we're still making housing if we're Habitat for Humanity, for example, right? Or, for the FDA. I think there is the Roberts Rule stuff. So I think maybe the government or federal government is probably where I see it the least. But when you think about state and local government, I think there's an opportunity to use an operating system for sure.
All right, perfect. Well, if you're following along on the podcast, we're going to switch over so you can actually be able to see his screen and be able to really dive into Streti itself. So be sure that you check this out either on YouTube, and this is the Third Element Consulting YouTube site, or our LinkedIn page. You'll be able to see that there as well. But that's it for the podcast, folks. We will see you next time. And if you're looking at the YouTube, we're going to switch over to Streti here in just a second. So here we go. Take it away.
Perfect. Perfect. And Don, can you see the screen?
I can.
Yeah, so there's two sort of ways to use Streti. One is very popular if you're a Microsoft user, you can actually use this all inside of Microsoft Teams and integrate it into a chatbot and into a ton of different integrations like HubSpot, Microsoft Planner, To Do, Monday.com, Asana. I'm just using the web app version, but there's three major components. So in here is teams, people, and company. So on the team side is where you would have like a team and have individual KPIs. So that would be under scorecards or headlines or what like FYIs, rocks, an issues list, which is super important, any follow up to dos. And then you would have agendas like an L10 meeting in the EOS world. And so you would have, basically it's from segue to conclusion. You're starting the meeting by having a personal professional check-in. You're going through KPIs, and the great story I always heard is like you're supposed to make pretend that you're on a deserted island and someone's just dropping off a piece of paper with numbers. Is the meeting running well? Is what you should be answering with the scorecards part.
Yeah, the
The
one the one thing I'm going to stop you there. That is super important. As a business owner, if you can think of the top 10 things, if you're on that deserted island, right? And you need to know whether your business is operating properly, it's the top 10 things. What things would you need to know specifically to say, yes, it's good, or no, I need to get rescued and I need to come home?
Exactly, exactly. I love adding the you need to get rescued and come home. I don't know with this weather now in here in Arlington, Virginia.
No,
I
I
don't
don't
think
want
I
I
would.
don't want to be rescued at this
Yeah,
point. I think it
yeah,
was like
exactly.
-1
Yeah.
this morning. It was -8 yesterday. It was crazy cold.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe not right now, but definitely sometime
Yeah.
before the first quarter is over. But so yeah, heading in here and then going into where the Coily rocks and where do they stand? Either if it's a number, if it's just an on track, off track. Um, they reserve headlines basically for FYIs, right? A new marketing hire starting or it's someone's anniversary. A great line from the traction book is that follow up and accountability is just a hard pulse, and you're only doing it because you're meeting once a week, and you want to be able to tell people you said you did what you're supposed to do. So there's a to do portion where you go over, all right, all the to dos on time, and then you spend most of your time in the issues list, and the issues list would be the noun. The going through them is called IDS, which would be the verb, which is identify, discuss, and solve. And so you would say, okay, well, we had a high CSAT score, for example, and we need someone to go to X company. And then they would go visit. And then we built integrations. We come from the breakage world, so we have a ton of integrations. So ConnectWise is one of them, Autotask, Halo. So if I wanted to go create a support ticket, I can go do that without a problem and very quickly. So it lives in this world, but it's also now like an example, a ticket inside of ConnectWise or Halo or Autotask. So you don't mix up sort of your IT PSA world and your operations world for the business. It can kind of stay in sort of one ecosystem. And then you would solve it and move on with your day once the timer kind of comes up. You grade the meeting. You want it to be a 1 through 10 or a 1 through 6 in the pinnacle world. And then you would kind of get a baseline of what's a good number for your team. And if it's lower than that, then you look into why is the meeting running the way it is. So that's all in the Teams thing. We have a very strong people component for having, a one-on-one meeting with someone, be it, once every 2 or 3 weeks. We follow a once every 3 weeks meeting. It gives us 18 meetings a year, but some people do it every 2 weeks, or even running a employee review or annual review. And then in the Pinnacle world, they call it SVP, which I'll show here very quickly. But in the EOS world, it'll be a VTO. It's what's the vision, what's the core value, the focus, marketing strategy. What are we doing this year? What are we doing this quarter? And then they have a very unique org chart that's sort of what they would say of moving away from an egocentric org chart to one just by function. So who sits in what seat and what do they do? So multiple people can sit in a seat, not necessarily of like who manages who. And so those are the big ones. And then just to show you very quickly, we're partnered with Pinnacle as well. And like Don had said, it's a very similar operating system. Greg Clear and the team, they do a great job, but they have like an SVP, which is a little bit different and has sort of a flywheel and a couple other things in here as well. But we do software both for EOS and for Pinnacle. But
Yeah.
that's the quick overview of the product.
So I'm going to dig down into some of this stuff just to give it a little bit more context. And one of the things that you pulled up was the org chart. So if we could pop over there, because you did mention that these are the roles, which is fantastic. These roles all tie back to reviews, even, which is kind of nice. So let's say that we're looking at finance. If somebody is assigned to finance, when you go in and do their review, it'll actually pull their particular role that you're looking at, and it reviews them for that particular role. So if they're, ensuring financial clarity and accountability, do they get it? Do they want it? Or do they have the capability to actually get it done? That's something that's going to be in that particular review. And we do quarterly reviews with our folks, so it's not quite as often as the one-on-ones that you're doing. Our service team works a little bit different. They do the one-on-ones, but for our average person, we do a quarterly review. So we do the get it, want it capacity to do it, and we use the roles to be able to function through that, which everybody really likes. It also pulls all of their metrics. So if they have KPIs that are assigned to them, it's in their review. You can see what to-dos they've hit, what rocks they've hit, and all of those pieces, parts. Yep. So all of those are right in there. You can see them directly. Yeah, he's going to create a review for us. This is fantastic. And there we go. So you can see what some of that actually looks like. And all of these are configurable. So depending on what business operating system you're running, you can pull all kinds of different pieces, parts through there, whether it's the core values, whether it's the data review. But you can see all of this directly in there, and you don't have to calculate it. The software does it for you, which is even better because I'm lazy and I love it when the software does it for me.
Yeah, this has been great to be able to run these, and we only used to do them once a year back at Brightgauge only because we didn't have software for it. And it's so time intensive, and this made it so it's a lot easier to do it with such a quicker cadence.
Well, and not to get too much on the HR side of things, but what we have found, and again, different people, different personalities, when you have entrepreneurs or founders or that type of personality, we don't feel the need for reviews. We don't, unfortunately. We also don't feel the need for titles. And there's all kinds of things we don't feel the need for, and we think other people don't too, and that's not true at all,
Yeah,
which is
that
which is
over
crazy.
communicate. Yeah, over communicating is key on that for sure,
Yes,
because it's something like you said. It's it's funny because it's I feel like business owners, if they could decide, they'd just be like, oh, flat org. Everybody just does their
right?
job and that's it. It's like, that's tough. I get it, but it's not the way the world works. So,
Exactly. So, in all of that, I think one of the biggest things that we have found with using an operating system is that constant review cycle, getting people the information that they need about their role, about their job, about their performance quickly and in their hands or at their fingertips, literally just by logging into a piece of software, makes it super easy for them to understand where they are, how they're doing. Are they getting the things done that they need to get done? Because that's what they're going to be judged on, right? Are they hitting their rocks? Are they getting their to-dos done? All of those things. And it's available to them 24/7.
yeah, exactly. So they know where they stand, what expected of them, and in that sort of get it, want it capacity to do it is imagine your organization where the answer is affirmative to all those three things for the roles that they have. If you had a full company of those type of employees, and it is possible. I've seen organizations completely transform from that. There's some tough conversations to be had,
Yep.
but everybody's better for it.
Well, and it's interesting. I think what we have found too is that you find people that they're the right people, but they're not always in the right seat in the company. So moving them to the right seat or the thing that like they find what their passion is and they didn't know what it was originally, and that's okay too. And if you can get them into the right seat, then all of a sudden they have that get it, want it capacity to do it. So we found that a couple of times and we've moved some folks around and to everybody's benefit.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's a huge unlock as well.
Yep. I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole I think we can go down with Strety here as far as that goes. But what I'm going to tell everybody is if you haven't taken the time or have never heard about this, or this is all brand new to you as far as business operating systems go, one, go out and take a look. Hit our website if you want. There's a great article on business operating systems there. Take a look at Strety. I think that'll give you additional information. Do a demo. They'll go through all of this with you and that way you have a better understanding of what's available to you. And if you're already using, Teams and SharePoint, this will actually integrate directly into all of that. All of the to-dos will actually integrate directly in as well. So you can actually automate some of this stuff within Teams and Power Automate for you if you need to do that as well. So it keeps everything kind of right in front of you. And that way people don't give you that, surprise Pikachu face when it comes around to review time and you're like, well, I didn't know I needed to do that. And you're like, well, we've been notifying you, you have the software, you've been to all of these meetings. How is this suddenly a surprise to you? So it avoids a lot of that and that way it gets rid of the issues that you have, whether it's by, identifying them or self-identification. We've had a couple people self-identify and say, you know what, I'm not in the right spot. This is not for me. And that's okay too.
Yeah, exactly. The over communication, the putting people in the right seat at the right place, at the right time is huge. And then, yeah, the having a place that where there's a chatbot telling that employee, here, check in your KPIs. Here's a to do you said you're going to do. Here, there's a quarterly review coming up. This is what's been expected of you. Just makes it that much easier on the business and definitely the business owner. So, and then I think Don, what you were mentioning, regardless of where someone's on this journey, be it they want to keep the business forever, they want to sell the business, etc. There is massive benefits to putting a business operation in place, regardless if you use Strety or not, if you use a piece of paper, but putting those systems in place and having all employees know it is such a massive benefit. Even financial, I've heard of companies getting an extra turn or something like that if they can hand over almost a playbook, an asset, right? Of here's how you run the business, as opposed to just saying, here's some financials and the business kind of runs reactively.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't even tell you I can. I mean, I have the metrics for it, but the when you start putting all of your processes in place, the amount of money and efficiency that you're saving is unreal.
Yeah.
Like you had no idea how inefficient you were previously. And once you do it one time, the ball just starts rolling and it keeps going. And then you're on this beautiful cycle of constant improvement.
Exactly.
So it
And
just gets better year over year.
Yeah, and imagine bringing that to your client base and saying, I put this business process in place, be it an EOS or scaling up or a Pinnacle, especially scaling up if you're in Canada and listening to this. Um, and taking that to your customer base and saying, look, learn from us, learn from our employee base. Those customers are never going to leave you if you're the person that then help them improve their business.
Yep. All right. That's about all I've got. Do you have anything else to add before we close this down?
That's it, Don. It's great to connect. And yeah, you can find us at strutty.com and love to have a conversation if any of your listeners are open to it.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All
And
right.
we'll see you next time.